Hi, everyone. Welcome back to She Blurbs Podcast. Today's guest is Marie Powell. Hi, Marie.
Hi.
Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm a young adult and children's author from Canada. I'm actually from Treaty 4 territory in Regina, Saskatchewan. And I have a series which is medieval fantasy set in Wales, 13th century Wales. But I also have, well, I have 40 different, like over 40 children's books published, mostly traditional publishers, Scholastic Education and Amicus and Lerner, publishers like that. And I also wrote short stories and poetry and a lot of articles, journalistic type articles. But really, this new series, the Last of the Gifted, the medieval Wales one, is kind of my heart project of the moment. So that's what I'd like to talk about tonight.
Okay. So when did you realize you first wanted to be an author?
Oh gosh, I think I was 6. I had a babysitter who was my neighbor. She was a lovely woman, and we were out in the backyard, and she convinced me to write my first book. So I, wrote it, and she allowed me to read it, which was a good thing because I was 6, right?
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and then I wrote like stuff all through high school, and I had very supportive teachers. But really, I kind of went towards journalism, I guess, because I kind of had to make a living, and that was more of a job, I guess you could say, but it was good practice. And I always wrote. If I was 6 when I wrote my first book, I was actually 46 when I had my first short story published. So it took a while.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
wow. At the age of 6, that's pretty cool though, to be a 6-year-old and writing your own book.
Well, it was, it was put together with like staples and coloring, crayons, but
That's funny. So
yeah.
where did you get your ideas from when you thought of your stories?
Mostly, because I was a journalist, most of like you hear a lot of stories that, like they say truth is stranger than fiction, right? And I don't know, because when you write journalistic stories, you use story techniques, you're looking for the character and what the motivation is and all that. And so I really am kind of inspired by real things, things that I hear about or things that people go through. And that's the basis of this new series, right? Is actually I set it rather than in a fantasy universe somewhere that doesn't exist. I had learned a little bit on a trip to Wales with my family. My grandfather was born in Wales, and we didn't, he was dead by the time I was born, right? So I didn't really know him, but I was kind of, I guess you could say, a little obsessed by him through my anyway. Eventually I set up a trip to Wales, and just kind of on spec, like we didn't really know where he was from, because I guess nobody could say the name of where it was. So he was from, so it was just from Wales, right? It was just bigger than you think. It's not a big country, but still. Anyway, I had like an inkling of where I thought we might end up, and I just set up. And also bear in mind, I was a freelance journalist at that point. So I was kind of thinking of it as travel articles. I'd write these travel articles about Wales, right? And the more we found out about, the more those articles became something else. And what I ended up, I only wrote a couple of things that were journalistic about my trips to Wales. Mostly, I've written these books. This whole fiction series has come out of that, because I learned about a piece of history that I didn't know had happened. And I found out things walking around, just experiencing the country, that were different than I thought. And that ultimately that led to these books, that led to this story. So
That's cool. So what does your family think about your writing?
no, I don't know. They don't tell me.
Really?
They're okay with it. I mean, it's not. This is not. This is in the 13th century. I don't think any of us remember back that far. So
That's funny. So, what inspired you to write The Last of the Gifted, Spirit, Sight, and Water Sight?
Well, we were we were walking around, like we were going to these different castles, right? And I found out that the big castles that I thought of as Welsh castles are actually not Welsh, they're English. They were created by Edward I to subjugate the Welsh after a big invasion, and the Welsh lost, right? So that was my first surprise, I guess you could say. And then I had rented a sheep farm, like a cottage on a working sheep farm. It was very cool, and the kids enjoyed it, and we were right beside this other castle that turned out to be a castle of the Welsh princes from before that invasion. And so we went over there one day, and it was like it was a real contrast. When you go to the big English castles like Conwy and Beaumaris and, Carnarvon, the ones that people know about, there's like little shops around there where you can buy tourist things. There's guides. You can hire a guide to take you around and all this, and you have to buy a ticket, and it's quite expensive, So I had bought tickets to everywhere, so that we could go. I bought a pass for myself and the kids, so we could go into as many castles as we could. So I have my little ticket in hand. We drive up to this Welsh castle, and there's like nobody. There's no ticket takers. There's no little shop. There's nothing. So we walk in, and like there's these signs, like with pictures that kind of have people falling off of rocks, and it's kind of like, enter at your own risk. It was like, oh. Anyway, we went in, and it was actually really beautiful. There was like a lovely waterfall and nice, sort of grassy area. And we walked up to this old stone thing, and the door to this castle was like way up on the first floor, and you had to go up this rickety stone set of steps to get in there, right? So we do that. We go up these steps, and we're thinking, and there's still nobody around. And we go into this castle, and around, it was kind of homey compared to the big English ones. It wasn't it was stone, but it was a friendly little castle, kind of, and you could see the hearth where they did the cooking and this and that, and we're walking around, and there's these placards, like posters, with pictures and little stories, about the history. And I find out that there's this big invasion that happened, and everybody, was basically killed, and the Welsh lost. And this is how Welsh lost its independence. They lost their law. They lost their, ability to use their own language and everything, which struck me because when we were there, the Welsh have gotten the right back now to use their own language. So kids go to school in Welsh, like the kid that was the daughter of the farmer where we were staying. She was going to school in Welsh. She could speak Welsh and everything. And the signs were all in Welsh first and English second. So I'm thinking, well, how did they get from this in the 1300s, like the, late 1200s, 13th century? How did they get from losing all of that to suddenly getting it back again, right? And so I was just really intrigued by that. I had to find out more about that, right? And that's where the stories that I've tried to use in both of these books are real. But the problem is a lot of records were destroyed at that time period. So I'm looking at it, and that's, in a way, that's a good thing for a novelist, because you want to gaps, you want to fill in the gaps, right? So my characters are fantasy characters. They're characters that have magic, right? They're two siblings, and they have like a hereditary system of magic that they kind of pledge, to kind of save their people during this big invasion. And one of the characters in the story is the last Prince of Wales, Lerner, and he is murdered. And so the boy, Hugh, my character, sees the murder and kind of forms this weird bond with the soul of the murdered Prince of Wales, and sort of takes him into his own mind, right? So then they have the experience, and this is an incredibly fierce and charismatic prince, who brought the country together until Edward killed him and took it away. And so this guy is like living inside my young character's mind, and at the same time, maybe not wanting to be there much, because that's weird, like to be a ghost and find yourself in somebody else's body would be kind of, discombobulating. So anyway, there's all that going on, and his sister can see the future in a drop of water. Like she can see in water, and it could be just a raindrop. She can, it'll take her to a vision of the future. And the main character, he not only can bond with the Prince of Wales, but he actually can bond with animals, so he can sort of control the minds of animals, and that grows. I don't want to give too much away, so
Yeah.
but it does grow through the series. So both of their gifts grow so that they change and evolve a little bit, and they have to try and use these magical gifts that they have to help their people survive this invasion and come out the other side of it with something intact. It's not, I didn't want to change the real history. I actually wanted to use the real history, because what fascinated me was how they survived it. Not so much that they went through this horrific genocidal time, but that they actually survived it and came out on the other end 800 years later with a language they could bring back as soon as they got the right to it. In the 1990s, when they were given the right to use their own language again, apparently it came back pretty much the way it had been spoken in the 1200s. So it hadn't, they literally had been speaking it underground, like in the mountains kind of thing, and keeping it alive through family to family, generation to generation, until they got the chance to use it again. And I was just thrilled with that, because my grandfather, I read on the census, my grandfather could speak Welsh. So, it kind of was a combination of imagining my heritage, I guess you could say, imagining my family and my heritage, and also the real life experience that they had at that time and how they overcame it and got to the other side of it. So that's basically, yeah.
So what you're saying is that they weren't allowed to speak their own language until the 90s, until 1990?
1990, yeah. From 1284, when their language and their law system were taken away from them and replaced by the English. And he literally did, Edward I literally did things there was an abbey near the castle where these guys were living. There was an abbey that was a Welsh abbey, and he took it apart stone by stone, walked it 7 miles down the road, and then had them build a new one that was English. He completely destroyed 22 they were kind of rural courts. They weren't really, courts the way that the English had them. They were called llys, and they were almost like a little farm town or something, where everybody would live together, and one of the princes would be there or visiting, from there were 22 of them, and they can only find evidence now of one. So he completely obliterated them, right? He destroyed the House of Eberfra altogether. He basically killed them in horrific ways. And the children who were actually related to him because of intermarriage in the previous generations, he didn't kill the children. He put them in monasteries and nunneries and for the rest of their lives, so that they were not allowed to marry or ever have children. Literally ended the house with that generation. Really deliberate, really deliberate actions that he took to keep the Welsh subjugated, because they had been just too much of a thorn in the side of the English for too many years, and he wasn't going to allow them even an inch. So things like that. I was so struck by that, I guess, that I wanted to use that, not change it. I don't want to write an alternative history in the sense that somehow they get out of this okay. I wanted to use all the horrible things that they went through and talk about how and sort of explore, I guess you could say, what they must have been like to be able to survive that and keep their language intact for the next 800 years, so that they could bring it back and suddenly it's the language everywhere, the language that is spoken in the schools. If you want a job in Wales, you have to learn to speak Welsh. There are places set up where you can go and do that, So I really wanted that kind of flavor, that kind of resilience, I guess, in my characters. So I don't want to sugarcoat what happened to them, in a way, right? Yeah.
Wow. That's inspiring me to write about Native American culture, because that's my culture. So I wanted to do a book about Native American culture, but it's a lot of studying, and I've already started, but it's a lot.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, like this too. It took me the better part of 10 years to put this together, in different ways, and I had to keep redoing it to make it, to make it really work, because I didn't want it to be I wanted it to hit people, you know, to be important, like, and to be emotional and all that, right? And it takes a lot of work, but it is really worth doing because, you know, like I say, what you're looking at is what gets people through that kind of thing, right? You know, what is at the heart of us that we can survive things like that, you know, as a people or as a group in a way, as well as individuals, you know, like how do we help each other through it? How do we inspire each other through it? And yeah, so I mean, really do it, Brooke. Like really, seriously, it's worth doing, you know. And there's a lot of reasons right now. Like we're looking at a lot of reasons coming out right now that that should be explored, you know, by someone who can. I think it's really cool too to sort of claim your heritage in that way, because you know you're kind of you're working with the real, you know, as well as the imagined, like because I also wanted to use a lot of legends and so these two characters are magical, right? But the magic doesn't save them. You know what I mean? The magic is a way that they can serve their people rather than some kind of, you know, salvation that somehow they can win, you know, because they don't win, right? That's the thing. They don't win. And yet they'll survive, right? So yeah.
I want to thank you so much, Marie, for coming on my show today. You see my dog. I told you she was going to start doing it. I want to thank you so much for coming on my podcast today and speaking with me about your books.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Good luck with your books.
Yeah, thank you. You have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. I want to thank you all so much for listening to my podcast. We have a guest here, another guest to our live. But I want to thank you all so much for listening to my podcast and for supporting me through my journey. And I have some exciting news after this. If you want to view any of Marie's books, you can go to her website, Marie Powell, and you can check out all of her new book, well, all of her books that she's written, and even her new book that's coming out in July. So I hope y'all have a great day, and thank you all so much for your support. Bye.